I remember reading an article a long time ago, and it was about this survivor of Nazi Germany. He moved over to the United States to escape the Nazis. And then all of a sudden he started viewing the laws which in the United States were turning towards Nazi laws. And then he headed back to Germany himself, and even his neighbors looked at him going, "Why are you leaving the United States?" And he told them why. And yet so many ordinary people, I did an interview recently with Jesse Woodrow from Hollywood, and he started talking about all these different laws, the Patriot Act and many other laws are passed in the United States. And during the interview, I interrupted him and I said, "Excuse me, but here in Canada, you can be arrested for 72 hours, pulled off the street, thrown in jail for 72 hours. You don't have access to your lawyer. And then as you're being released, they can turn around and re-arrest you. Also, with the gun control laws put in place here in Canada, they can access your house without a search warrant. Turn around, if they find anything illegal, you're going to jail." Wow. And they have another law in place here in Canada which allows the police the right to break the law in order to arrest you. In order to gather, they use that law to go after certain criminal, gangs here in Canada. But what happens is by passing that law, they themselves have become the criminals. So, and we also have to remember Operation Paperclip, which brought the Nazis over here. We also have to remember the residential schools here in Canada where over 50,000 Aboriginal children died. So Canada, I view Canada as nothing more than leaf and space. I view it for, right now, we are not a nation under ourself, and the only way we can do is get back to power. But Canada has been used as a testing ground to bring forth the laws that are now going in place in the United States, much like Northern Ireland in regards to the UK. Could you please comment on that?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we've had civil war. We had civil war in Northern Ireland for 25 years. I mean, it's always rather quaintly called the Troubles by the UK establishment. But it was effectively civil war where the IRA was fighting for independence from the UK. They wanted Northern Ireland to be part of Greater Ireland era. And that led to sectarian violence starting in the early 1970s. And it was an incredibly messy and bloody and covert war. The IRA was quite a sophisticated terrorist organisation, and it evolved into a position where it tended to give warnings, code-worded warnings, before it carried out an attack in order to minimise the civilian casualties. I mean, not out of any humanity, I hasten to add, but more just as PR necessity. But they sort of developed from there, but there was also loyalist terrorists which were fighting them back who wanted to stay as part of the UK. So there was great violence on the streets, and the British Army was sent in. The British Army actually ramped up the violence on Bloody Sunday when they unwittingly, or wittingly perhaps, shot 13 innocent Catholics on the streets of Belfast. And that just escalated the whole thing. And we saw all sorts of erosions of basic human rights in Ireland. They took away decent, proper trials in front of your peer group. So they introduced something called the diplock courts for terrorists, which basically was a case of you came up in front of a judge who would judge you. There was no evidence in front of a jury because the security forces basically said that we can't put evidence around terrorist cases in front of a jury because of national security. So that took away the right to a fair trial. We had terrorist suspects rounded up and interned in the Maze prison, particularly Catholics. It was very sort of prejudiced as well, sort of against one community rather than the other. And that was done on the basis of flawed intelligence often. So many people were put to prison on the say-so of intelligence officers and military officers, not on an evidential chain of, that could be used in front of a jury. And they were just thrown in prison indefinitely. Now, of course, many of these people were innocent when they went in, but when they came out, or should we just say that internment acted as a very good recruiting ground for the terrorist organisations? So we have all these sort of things. There was also the policy, much discussed, much debated, of the SAS being sent in. This is our special services being sent in and used on a shoot-to-kill type missions in Northern Ireland in the late 70s and 80s. So basically gunning down people they have been led to believe were terrorists on the streets of Northern Ireland. And a whole raft of other very draconian issues. I mean, sometimes, they'd have curfew in towns, that sort of thing. And people just lived in fear. And that was Northern Ireland. And I think most people on the UK mainland just thought, that's off our country. We don't need to worry about it. But then, of course, the IRA got quite fly and they began to let off bombs on mainland UK territory. And that's when things got really vicious in Northern Ireland. I mean, the hunt got very dangerous for them, and as it was quite dangerous in the UK as well. Bombs were going off on a fairly regular basis on UK streets. We were at a much greater risk of terrorism then than we ever are now from Al-Qaeda, and yet we'd kept most of our civil liberties in the UK mainland at the time. But now what we're seeing is, because of this perceived threat from the nebulous notion of Al-Qaeda, that we are going the way that Northern Ireland went in the 70s and 80s. We are losing all our rights to protect us from this threat. We've had one atrocity carried out by Al-Qaeda on British UK soil, and yet we've thrown away all the basic rights that we took for granted, even at the height of the IRA campaign. So, as you say, it was pretty much a testing ground in Northern Ireland. We've had, in the UK now, Islamic terrorist suspects thrown in prison without charge, without trial, which is internment, first time on the UK mainland outside of time of war. We've had people being extraordinarily rendered to third world countries where they're tortured, and the intelligence agencies are getting involved. And we're also seeing people being stopped and searched under Section 44 of the Terrorism Act 2005. On the streets of Britain, tens of thousands of people are stopped every year, and they are arrested purely because the police want to ascertain their identity. This is like living in a police state. And all these measures were seen in Northern Ireland, and now they're on the UK mainland. But as I said, we're at far greater threat in the 70s, 80s and 90s from the IRA, realistically, than we are from Al-Qaeda. And yet then we didn't give away our freedoms. Now we are, because of scaremongering. Oh, sorry, the other point, just one other issue around that as well, is how long they can hold terrorist suspects without charge when the police arrest them. Now, again, in the old days, it used to be 3 days. You could arrest someone, keep them in police cells to question them for 3 days. In the 80s, late 80s, there was a huge debate about whether to increase that time limit to 7 days. And there was an uproar from civil liberties people saying, what about the rights of these suspects? They're innocent till proven guilty. You can't hold them for 7 days. Now, of course, with the threat from the nebulous notion of Al-Qaeda, it's gone up to 28 days. That's a whole month in a police cell being questioned without charge. And the government wanted to put it up to 90 days, which is 3 months. It's just obscene, and it's overreaction. It's hysterical overreaction.
I remember reading about that. Also, at the same time, I also remember reading about there's more cameras in the UK than any other nation at this time.
Very much so, yeah.
And when my wife and I, we lived in Las Vegas for almost 5 years. Every single resort that you enter into, they have facial recognition in there. As soon as you walk through the door, your face is being scanned, and basically it ran through the FBI, CIA, and every Interpol and all these different programs. So if you're a criminal of any type, boom, your alarm bells are going to go off. They're going to bring that exact same, I've heard tell that they're going to bring that exact same program up to here in Vancouver in regards to the Olympics in 2010. Have you ever heard anything about this particular program, facial recognition stuff?
Yes, they've of course used it in the UK. They use it at airports, and I think they began to use it in the late 1990s. There was a pilot scheme. I come from a place called Guernsey in the Channel Islands, little sort of islands off the coast of France, which happen to be British. And the pilot scheme was used on the flights to those islands in the late 1990s. So, I mean, it's a bit like going to the States, you have to sort of smile at the camera and everything. So the technology's been around for a long time. What's interesting, though, is where they're getting this information from. What are the databases they're cross-referencing these photographs on? How are they going to gather the facial recognition data they need in order to run those tests as you walk into, say, the Olympic Village or whatever? In the UK, they're bringing in, they're trying to bring in ID cards, even though senior counter-terrorism officers say that will not stop terrorism, which is the justification for them. And they want to put our biometric details on those. And from next year, if the government continues to push through this programme, it basically means if you want to buy a passport to travel out of the UK, you have to give all your biometric details to the ID database. And that's, of course, how they're going to gather facial recognition issues. Is whether or not you actually want to buy an ID card, which is extra cost, of course, but you have to give the information for the ID card, otherwise you're not allowed a passport, you're not allowed to leave and have freedom of travel.